Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Slingin Leather, Southern California's official combat sports show. And I am your host, Scuba Steve. Thank you all for tuning back in. And the double fight week extravaganza, ladies and gentlemen, lived up to every expectation it had set for it. Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. finally cements a new era in boxing. Salt Lake City, Utah has now become the official head kick city of the world. And after two more ridiculously vicious head kick finishes, one we will discuss later in this video, had to give a shout out to my boy Roman Capelov for taking Claudio Ribeiro's head and kicking it into the third row early in this prelim. And it looked sensational. That was one of the more incredible finishes that we will not be discussing in depth today. But he did his part in cementing Salt Lake City as the head kick city of the world. We're going to be breaking down Errol Spence Jr. versus Terrence Crawford as well as UFC 291 in this video. And we got to start with UFC 291, ladies and gentlemen, because this was an absolute resounding success, despite there no being undisputed title being contested. And only having 11 fights in one card. It was a rather short night, partially in due to the fact that Stephen Thompson's opponent, Michelle Pajeda, missed weight, so I never got to see that pick turn out. But out of 11 fights, we had 9 finishes, 5 of which were submissions, 4 of which were knockouts, and just made this entire card just a highlight reel of sorts. And we're going to be breaking down this main card for you guys today. And starting off with one of the more surprising finishes in terms of actual raw decision rather than how it came about. Kevin Holland was able to lock up a Darce choke against the number 12 ranked Michael Chiesa. And a lot of people were wondering, after a 2-year layoff from Michael Chiesa, they were questioning whether he had developed the striking to even stand up and survive against Kevin Holland, because we all know how good his striking really is. And unfortunately found out that this certainly was not the case. Chiesa really struggled with a lot of Holland's pressure and a lot of the power shots, especially some of those big knees that came in the clinch. I also saw that Kevin Holland did a great job of really making sure that his distance was maintained in this fight. He really made it so he was the only one landing the significant strikes, even though Chiesa was throwing back. And previously in Michael Chiesa's career, he had struggled with Darce chokes. 2 previous losses had come via Darce choke, and one was by Jorge Masvidal, who we all know is not a submission type of fighter. And we came in with this narrative. We weren't sure if it was really going to show itself against a dedicated striker like Kevin Holland. However, as Chiesa was shooting in for a takedown early in the first round, he left his neck exposed, and Holland's long arms, he has a damn near 80-inch reach, was able to lock up the submission for the Darce choke finish. And Holland really showed that he was certainly certainly has a ground game on him, despite having the reputation that he does as a stand-up finisher. And despite his struggles against wrestlers in the middleweight division such as Marvin Vettori and Derek Brunson. However, after this fight took place, we found out that Kevin Holland is no longer staying at 170, a weight class that he has seen much success in. And despite him losing a lot of fights at middleweight, he says that since the BMF title is staying at 155 and it's going to reside at 155, there's no reason for him to be at 170 and potentially capture that title, because Kevin Holland's the type of fighter that doesn't want an undisputed title as his end goal. He's never really said that he is in this to become an undisputed world champion. He's in this to make the dough. He's in this to make money. And he's done a great job of solidifying himself as a UFC personality. But I don't know if he's going to realize a lot of success at 170. We've already seen him go against the highest echelon, and Marvin Vettori is certainly still in that mix of the highest echelon of the middleweight division, while Derek Brunson is showing some signs of aging and showing that his gas tank really isn't where it needs to be. In his second fight versus Holland, it's really going to be interesting in how that pans out if Holland's able to survive the early takedowns. But this is going to be an incredibly dangerous and incredibly intriguing move for Kevin Holland. I think he is an incredibly talented fighter and an incredibly gifted striker with great speed in his hands. And he will certainly have a chin upgrade once he goes back to 185. incredible performance by Kevin Holland as a whole, but it's really going to see. I mean, it's really going to be interesting to see how he does at 185. He only had one true loss at 170. The other loss he suffered was against Khamzat Chimaev, and that was in a catchweight fight. He chose to stand up with Stephen Thompson and broke his hand in the first round, which really spelt his demise for the rest of that event. And despite this, I think he would have realized a lot of success at 170. I dare I say he's even championship caliber at 170. I just don't really see it as big of a possibility as I do at 185, especially with guys like Israel Adesanya and Khamzat Chimaev Khamzat Chimaev inserting himself back into that division, and Izzy being the champion. I really don't see Kevin Holland capturing a title in this weight class. Despite this decision, always going to watch this guy fight. It is absolute fireworks and a great performance by him this past Saturday at UFC 291. Next, we have... It's going to hurt, ladies and gentlemen. It ain't going to feel good. But I'm going to say it anyway. Bobby Green defeats Tony Ferguson by submission using the arm triangle. And as much as it hurts to say, Bobby Green looked as fast as ever at 36 years old. His style is never conducive to defense. It's never been conducive to being as airtight as a lot of defensive fighters are. Namely Dustin Poirier. The way he dodges the counters, the way he keeps the left hand up and turns his elbow up to defend the shots coming on the other side is something that a lot of people are taking note of, and a lot of people are imitating, because it provides such a high guard and it provides such a holistic guard against very good strikers who hit several targets at once. Bobby Green does not take this approach. Bobby Green, he's like this throughout the whole fight. His hands are at his waist, and he's throwing jabs and he's throwing shots from his waist. And he is so dang fast at 36 years old. He's able to keep this style and make it work. And despite Tony Ferguson getting the takedown in the early going and looking solid in terms of his cardio, Tony is a cardio freak, and that is something I feel like is going to stay with him till the end of his career, considering how rigorously he trains his cardio. I think that we did definitely see Bobby Green start to catch on to the counters and start to catch on to the timing of Tony Ferguson, because Tony did not look fast in this fight. Tony Ferguson has always been known for his ability to keep up with the speed of a lot of the lightweight division's fastest fighters. This was as far from the truth as we've ever seen in his entire career, ladies and gentlemen. Bobby Green, who is already one of the fastest lightweights in the world, made him look like he was in slow motion. And Ferguson, despite, training his cardio, it certainly looked like he wasn't going forward with as much ferocity as he was in the first round. It may have been because he was searching for that takedown in the first round, but it does not negate the fact that he certainly looked rather tired going into that third round. And I think if this fight was more of a stand-up fight, he would have been able to hang. He would have been able to, stay in this fight for its entirety. But he shot for a takedown, got reversed by Bobby Green, and Bobby Green did a great job of staying patient on top and was able to lock up the arm triangle submission. And this is the hardest point in the fight. Watching Tony flail in desperation, trying to escape this arm triangle, was so hard, ladies and gentlemen. He looked like he was fighting tooth and nail to get out of a submission, like he does in every one of his submission attempts. The armbar against Oliveira, the leg lock against Dariush, this is on brand for Tony Ferguson, and I would have never thought anything else. I would have never thought he wouldn't be fighting tooth and nail to get out of a submission. But it really showed that Bobby Green waited for the right moment, waiting for all of his weight to be on the other side of Ferguson and have all the weight be on his neck. And my Uncle Joe, he likes Tony Ferguson too. He loves fights. And he said a phrase that I will never personally forget, especially considering how much I love Tony Ferguson and love watching him fight. As Bobby Green had that submission in, and my Uncle Joe saw him flailing in complete desperation. He's like, don't tap, just die. Just die. And I was like, no matter how much, obviously we don't want Tony Ferguson to die. We're going to say that in the outset because my Uncle Joe's a good man. But if this is his last fight, I want him to go out like a warrior, just like he did tonight. He waited till he had nothing left and flailed on the ground until he was done. And Bobby Green put him out cold. And it was a great showing by Bobby Green. It shows that he still has something left in the submission department. And despite the fact I don't see him ever winning an undisputed title shot, he looked really good at the age of 36. And should this be Tony's last fight? This is the hardest question. And Uncle Chael Sonnen had a great quote early in this fight week in an interview with the Mac Life that said, calling for someone's retirement is calling for their unemployment, especially when you're talking about a guy like Tony Ferguson. Even though he's said earlier in this fight week he's done things to set him up post-life after UFC, I still think that it's going to be real hard for me to ever call for someone's retirement. And despite all the damage that Tony has taken, despite all the hard losses he's had in his last 6 fights, being 0-6 in his last 6 fights, I just can't watch this. Like, it's gonna get hard for me to keep watching this because, good Lord, Tony, how many times are we going to have to see you get beat so convincingly to where we can finally induct you to the UFC Hall of Fame and finally solidify your legacy as one of the great lightweights to ever walk the face of the planet? And even all this, I think he's destined for the UFC Hall of Fame. I'm legitimately concerned with his health, and I don't know if it's going to be good to see Tony Ferguson taking all this damage into his 40s as he's 39 right now. We may get one more swan song fight against a guy that is on his way out like Joe Lozon, but at this point, I don't even know if I want to see that. Best of luck to Tony. Incredible win for Bobby Green, and just a very mixed emotions fight overall, but huge win for Bobby Green. Next, we had the replacement fight for Stephen Thompson versus Michel Pereira in Derek Lewis, moving up from the prelims. I know, moving up to from the prelims. Main card is where Derek Lewis has lived the majority of his career, and to see him get back on here based on a formality and a technicality is a little weird, but the fact that we got him on the main card is all that matters. And boy, did he make that worth his time, ladies and gentlemen. The Black Beast channeled his inner Jorge Masvidal and opened the fight with a flying knee that landed clean. The Black Beast entered this week with a 6-pack, ladies and gentlemen. 163.5. This guy's a freaking giant. He has a 6-pack at 263 pounds. How is Derek Lewis having a 6-pack the new mythical fighter? Because he looked flawless in this fight. He looked agile, and sure, Derek Lewis always throws crazy techniques at the beginning of a fight. That's his style. He always does this, but he ain't never landed before. The way he landed at this fight was just with authority. And he did a great job of seeing that De Lima's guard was split. And he had the opportunity to rush in and really take that opportunity to land that flying knee and just follow it up with vicious ground and pound. A huge win for the Black Beast with authority. Left no questions to be asked. He's still got some left in the tank, and especially if he sticks on this weight cutting, this conditioning routine that he's got right now, whoo! Derek Lewis might be a problem for the second time in his career, ladies and gentlemen. And even though he didn't mean to land this shot, he said admittedly after the post-fight, after he took his shorts off and was flailing them over his head, he said he didn't even manage to land, he didn't even think to land that shot. He just threw it. And it still landed. Call me crazy, but who knows? 6-pack Lewis might be the next mythical fighter in UFC history, and it'll be incredible to see how he performs next. Rogerio de Lima was not ranked, neither was Lewis, and I think that this performance is going to give him another ranked opponent. Hopefully he doesn't go against another grappler like Sergey Spivak or Tom Aspinall or any of these guys that are so good on the ground in the heavyweight division. I just want to see fights. I just want to see these bangers, ladies and gentlemen. Whenever you have Derek Lewis on a fight card, you sit down and watch for reasons like this. He looked so good this past weekend, and nothing but a huge congratulations for Derek Lewis, and so good to see him get back in the win column. And best of luck to Marcos Rogerio de Lima. He's probably going to be back. It wasn't the most vicious of knockouts. It wasn't like he wasn't out cold like Ben Askren. He was certainly hurt. But I do think Rogerio de Lima does also have some of the best grappling in the division. However, Derek Lewis, incredible win. Nothing but fireworks, ladies and gentlemen. Just spectacular. Next, on the co-main event, we had one of the closest fights of the evening, ladies and gentlemen. Alex Pereira was able to defeat Jan Blachowicz by split decision, and in an incredibly close split decision, may I say myself. I actually had Jan Blachowicz winning this fight by the end. But mind you, the way this fight played out, a lot of people also felt that way. A lot of people on social media have said afterward that they believe Derek Lewis. I'm still on the Derek Lewis knockout, guys. They still believe that Jan Blachowicz did enough to win this fight because he was able to take Alex down in the first and was really, really close to locking up a rear naked choke. And a little bit of a footnote in this fight. Not a lot of people are saying anything. Alex Pereira's submission defense has never really been tested, has it? It's never really been the fact that he's had someone on his back, someone as seasoned as Jan Blachowicz, and getting the rear naked choke. We've never seen him in the UFC defend from a position like that. So the fact that he was able to get out of that choke and was able to survive the first round already says a lot about how much he's working with Glover Teixeira and working out on his grappling. And defense comes first. You're teaching blue belts, you're teaching white belts, you're teaching the lowest level in BJJ. The first thing they teach you are positions and how to get out of them. And even though Jan Blachowicz is a great grappler in his own right, Alex Pereira showed his blue belt medal. He showed his ability to get out of the position and be able to at least get up and impose his own offense. And in MMA, hell, that's all you need. You don't need to be a Damian Maia on the back. You need to be able to avoid trouble. And this is exactly what Alex did. And out of all the fighters on this card, in the second and third round, Jan Blachowicz looked the most tired. And Alex really did a great job of establishing his striking late into this fight. And despite none of them really being fight-altering shots, with Jan having his head bobble around like a bobblehead, I think that despite all these things, I can see it going to Alex Pereira. He did just enough with the leg kicks. He had a welt the size of my fist on Jan Blachowicz's calf by the end of that fight. And out of all the fights I've ever seen, and out of all the talk I've heard of the essence that the way you look after the fight can greatly determine how the fight is scored, I never believed that. I never once really saw an instance where the body language of a fighter directly determined the outcome of a fight, but this one. Jan Blachowicz looked like he had ran 5 consecutive marathons by the end of this fight. And he looked so gassed to the point where he looked like he could hardly even stand up straight. He was bending over at the waist. He was sucking air by the end of this fight. And did an overall excellent job of staying in it and being that dog that we know Jan Blachowicz is. But a lot of people are bringing up the Jan versus O'Malley decision in reference to this fight. Because this, for people that believe that Petr Yan took that fight, this is the second time that a grappler has been robbed of a decision victory in a UFC pay-per-view main card. And despite my belief that Sean O'Malley won that fight, there's a glaring difference between the two. Alex Pereira was one wrong move in the first round away from getting submitted by Jan Blachowicz. Sean O'Malley never once was in that position. He never had his back taken. He was never so tight in an armbar that he almost had his arm broken. He was never so deep in a leg lock to where they tore his knee apart. He was never in that position with Petr Yan. Petr Yan took him down to land, ground, and pound. Jan Blachowicz was able to transition into a submission, making the big difference in this fight. That's where I believe that the glaring difference lies, in the quality of Petr Yan versus Jan Blachowicz's ground time. That Petr Yan, although he was able to land shots, Sean O'Malley was fighting with submissions off the back. he was still mounting his own offense, even though the casual won't really see that as much offense. He absolutely was. Alex Pereira was not mounting any offense in that first round. He had his back taken, and he was simply trying to defend his chin so it would not get taken. And I think that sort of situation, in my personal opinion, determines the outcome of the decision. I think Jan Blachowicz did just enough to win this fight. In the fight, I don't care how he looked after. I don't care how ridiculous or how out of left field you would have assumed Alex Pereira defending a rear naked choke is. I think Jan Blachowicz did just enough in this fight. 5 minutes of ground control, 5 minutes and 31 seconds, I believe, is enough for at least a round, even more. He didn't have a whole lot of ground control time in the third round. At the end, he was mounting no offense at the end, so I could see how you could still give Alex Pereira that round. But it was such a close fight, razor-thin decision. I believe that despite Jan losing this fight, I don't think his stock dropped at all. I think he's still one of the top light heavyweights in the world, and he will certainly be back. And Alex Pereira is now looking at his his third title fight in 4 fights, after only having 9 fights in mixed martial arts altogether, not even in the UFC. And this is an incredible position for Alex to be in, and I think this allows him to keep his star power, even though he's not fighting Israel Adesanya. And I do believe that Jan Blachowicz certainly will be back, and certainly will fight for another UFC title by the end of his career. And now, this main event, ladies and gentlemen, and I cannot wait. I simply cannot, I could not wait to discuss this with you, ladies and gentlemen, because, oh my good lord, Justin Gaethje pulls the Usman head kick from his own butt. Kamaru Usman must have been in his ear like, yo, buddy, don't get hit by that head kick, but you hit him with that head kick. You go one, we go left, right, boom, head kick. Don't even matter. And oh, baby, this head kick was so damn sweet, ladies and gentlemen. DP, one of my favorite fighter in the UFC right now. If I had to pick one favorite fighter, it's got to be Dustin Poirier, just based on how he's done in his previous fights. But Gaethje, oh my goodness, he looked so dang good in this fight. Not to mention, this was out of absolute nowhere. Justin Gaethje had never landed a head kick in his career for a knockout, and Dustin Poirier had never been knocked out by a head kick in his career. And just the head kick aside, Justin Gaethje looked fantastic in this fight. He really, really did. The evolution between 1.0 and 2.0 was as evident as ever in this fight. He obviously landed the harder counters against Poirier. Even though Poirier was able to hurt him by the end of the first round, I do think that Justin Gaethje landed the higher volume of significant strikes in that first round. And he looked like he was landing with more authority since he was more patient. His uppercuts and his hooks didn't look like they were hurting Dustin Poirier as much as they did in the first. As much as they did in the first fight. In the second fight, if that made any sense. The second fight, they looked harder. That's what I'm saying. But he looked very patient, and in the second round, he did a good job of maintaining his distance. And in the first round, he did at least throw up the head kick a few times to get Dustin to think about it. And in that third round, in the second round, 1 minute in, Justin Gaethje lands the head kick of head kicks in an almost identical fashion, or an almost mirrored fashion in how Leon Edwards was able to knock out Kamaru Usman 1 year ago. And I don't think I've been in even greater shock in my martial arts viewing career other than the head kick that happened a year ago today. Salt Lake City has produced my 2 favorite finishes potentially in fighting history, because it's just authority. It's the technicality in which he did it. He set it up beautifully. He did it the exact same on how Leon Edwards did it against Kamaru Usman. And all the credit to Kamaru Usman for being just as happy for Gaethje. And I think this opens up Gaethje for his second undisputed title shot. I think he certainly won the bidding war against who goes against the winner of Oliveira versus Makhachev 2. And not only this, he now has Conor McGregor calling him out on Twitter, because when is Conor McGregor not saying something absolutely ridiculous on Twitter? He wants now Justin Gaethje instead of Michael Chandler. And sure, I get it. I mean, Michael Chandler has lost to the two guys in this last weekend's main event, but I just don't see it happening. Even though Conor is going to be the biggest draw in the UFC till his career ends, I think that Justin Gaethje is smart enough to avoid this complete waste of time that Conor McGregor is proposing him right now. And I see him going for the undisputed title shot. It's going to be it really is going to be dependent on who wins the rematch against Charles Oliveira and Islam Makhachev, but I do see him at least having a chance in one of those fights. And now, transitioning over to the fight of the century, ladies and gentlemen, Terence Crawford solidified why he is the best welterweight in the world in boxing, and he put on an absolute masterclass against Errol Spence Jr., and it was evident that Errol Spence didn't have what I thought he would have quite early in this fight. It was evident in the head movement. It really was evident that he wasn't able to avoid a lot of the counters that Terence Crawford was offering. It was evident in his lack of power. I thought Errol Spence, being the natural bigger fighter and having the possibility to fight at the next big weight class at 150 or 156, I think that he would have had enough pop to at least give Terence Crawford enough fear for going into the pocket and exchanging with him. And this simply wasn't the case. Terence Crawford had no respect for his power throughout this fight. And the biggest thing is that Terence Crawford's balance and his defense and his countering ability is so damn good. He was never off balance in this fight. He was always in a position to counter back and throw back. And because of his lack of power, Terence Crawford was able to labor on the strength of his chin. He really was able to show that he can hang in there with a huge power puncher like Errol Spence, or at least how we thought an incredible power puncher Errol Spence was, and take these shots and land incredibly risky counters like lead uppercuts. Errol Spence, one of his best shots is his left hook. He's a southpaw. It's one of his strongest punches. And despite that, Terence Crawford throwing a lead uppercut, leaving the entire right side of his head exposed for that left hook, and he wouldn't be throwing that punch unless he was absolutely certain he could take that. And it showed you just how good Terence Crawford is at the welterweight division. He was able to carry this power all the way up from 135 to 147, which is already a statement in and of its own, and he was able to keep his chin while doing so. I know being in the bigger weight class affords him a better chin, but when you're going against bigger punchers, sometimes it's just something different entirely. And it was evident in the way that Terence Crawford was able to show that he was able to survive these punches, and how Errol Spence simply was not able to take these punches against Terence Crawford. I mean, he was just landing punishing blow after punishing blow. I didn't think T. Croft was going to have enough to put him out cold, but I thought it was very possible by the end of this fight. If I had, in a different universe, if I had picked this a different way, I think Terence Crawford was going to be beating Errol Spence down like a schoolyard fight over the 12 rounds. And although Spence was stopped in the 7th, I do applaud him for his gameness and for his willingness to go into this fight against Terence Crawford and really put the undisputed title on the line. You should never come down on a fighter like that, because he's putting everything on the line. And all the respect to Errol Spence Jr., and it's certain that he will be back despite Stephen A's ridiculous claims that he should retire after this fight. What are you talking about, Stephen A? I swear I could go up to ESPN and do a better job than Stephen A, even though I'm literally posting a continuous YouTube video through my laptop camcorder. I think I could do a better job at talking about fights than Stephen A. Smith, because that's just the pure fact of the situation. Stephen A. Smith wants him to retire on his first loss of his career. No fighter is ever going to do that. They are a fighter. That is their profession. They are ingrained with the will to overcome. That's just completely out of the realm of possibility. He's 33 years old. He's still in his prime, and you're going to call for his retirement? That was one of the worst takes I saw after this fight week. And the fact that one of the the self-proclaimed biggest journalist in sports right now is going to claim that Errol Spence should retire, and this is the same guy that claimed Cowboy quit against Conor McGregor in one of the biggest punchers in MMA. He's saying that Cowboy Cerrone quit. No one should ever listen to that guy about his sports takes. But despite that, I digress. Calm down. It was a phenomenal fight for Terrence Crawford. Solidified his legacy and his era in boxing right now. And a lot of people are even making these lofty claims right now that he could beat Floyd Mayweather. That's the complete opposite to what Stephen A is asserting. Despite we will never see this fight happen, and we will never ever see Floyd Mayweather put his 50-0 record on the line again. I don't think Floyd's defense could ever be denied in that fight. And despite how much I would want to see it, we're never going to see it. That would be the true fight of the century. Especially, imagine Floyd Mayweather at damn near 50 years old going in and outboxing Terrence Crawford. What would that look like? That would just be insanity. But the Terrence Crawford era is now officially upon us, ladies and gentlemen. Justin Gaethje is officially the UFC's new BMF, and I'm really curious to see what you guys think about this. I'm personally so grateful to be in this era of combat sports where we have two of the biggest sports leagues in the world with boxing and the UFC just capturing the entire world's attention this past weekend. Everyone's talking about these events, and the fact that I get to live in this era and appreciate what is happening in front of me, I just could not be more grateful, ladies and gentlemen. And I gotta ask you guys, what do you guys think about the fights this weekend? How did you see the Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence fight going before and after the fight? What did you think of Justin Gaethje's incredible head kick of Dustin Poirier, or Salt Lake City being the new head kick city of the world? I want to hear what you guys have to say in the comments section below. Hit the like and subscribe buttons for more of Southern California's official combat sports show, and follow us on Twitter in the link in the description, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you guys in the next one.